headlines this hour. Police have confirmed that 17 people have been gunned down in Gobozana village at Lusikisiki in the Eastern Cape. The South African Weather Service predicts a temperature drop across various regions from tomorrow until Tuesday, with more snowfall expected in large parts of KwaZulu-Natal. And the Western Cape High Court has granted the DA an urgent interdict to stop Mkhonto weSizwe Parliamentary Leader Dr. John Hlophe from serving on the Judicial Service Commission. Good afternoon. Welcome to Week in Review. We are with you from our studio here in Johannesburg. Now, during the next 2 hours, we will review some of the biggest stories of the week. I'm Gustav Freiling, and you can participate. You share your comments or ask your own questions by giving us a call. Our number here in the studio is 011 714 0680, 0681 or 0682. Right, we start with this tragic story. 17 people have been gunned down in the Ngobozana area at Lusikisiki in the Eastern Cape. The incident happened around midnight, with 13 members from one family and 4 from another family killed. The 18th person is in a critical condition. Our SABC News reporter Nomzwanele Ngoma is on the story and joins us live from the scene now. Good afternoon. What is the latest that you can tell us from there today?
Greetings to you and to the viewers at home. At the moment, we still have the same information that you've just said, where 17 people were gunned down, 13 from one family and another 4 from another family. The incident happened where there was a number of people in one of the households because they were preparing to go to another family that was going to perform a ceremony whereby a morning ceremony that was what's going to be performed, because we hear that where they were going, the mother of that household, which is born from one of the families that these 17 people were murdered, was in mourning for 2 of her children that died. So this incident just happened while they were preparing for that ceremony. But we do have one of the people that was there last night who had everything when it happened, who joins us now. Mama, masikwamukele ke SABC. Ngicela usichazele into ba uve ntoni, kwenzeke ntoni, isenza kanjani?
Bekusebusuku ekuseni kusa njengabo-2 besilele sizolungiselela basivuke sibheke emumbulweni eMantlaneni. Seva ke kukhala qoqo emnyango, then seva ke izabhamu zidubula, sazimela ke thina abakwazi ukusifumana thina sabanga abasindileyo ke. Kodwa ke abanye babe kwezinye izindlu, nathi besikwenye ihouse, sisinde sabathathu nosana olwesine oluna 1 month olukwazileyo ukusinda.
Inenza izivinjani mama into yezisiganeko zimane ukwenzeka, ingakumbi yenzeke nikhona nani nidekisile?
Itrauma enkulu, kunzima, asikamkeli nangoku. Kusebuhlungu, kusenzima, asikaphili ngaphakathi emphefumulweni yethu. Kusenzima kakhulu, kusenzima, asikayamkeli.
Ingaba bakhona abantu mhlawumbe umuntu omdala kwabantu basekileyo uyayazi uba ebemngakanani nomncinci kwaba baye basoleke uba mhlawumbe ebemngakanani?
Omdala inomba olapha ku plus minus 70 years. Omncinane inoba olapha ku 14-15 years. Oyena mncinane bonke kwaba basolekileyo.
Okay, that is one of the people who was in one of the houses where the incident happened, just telling us that they were part of, they were in that household, but they managed to hide. So that is how they were not part of the incident. They didn't die. But there's also a General Phumzile Cekana here who wasn't able to speak to us, saying that more information has been addressed by Commissioner Fani Masemola, but we will take it, we'll go inside and just to see if they do allow us to go in, just to see, because we hear that the bodies are still inside, forensic is still busy, they just got here. It's back to you in studio.
We have to stay with you for a while now. I just want to ask you, you've been there for a while now, and obviously that crime scene is active, it is ongoing, the investigation there is ongoing. Just to recap, you have no further information as to what could have led to this.
There's no motive at the moment. The police haven't given us any more information besides what we have at the moment. But we did hear that there is a search that is currently underway, or that will be underway very soon. Other than that, there's no more information that we have.
How rife are mass killings in this province and in that area where you are? Is this something that happens there?
It's very common, because not so long ago we were here, we're covering a story of another household that was chased away because they were accused of performing witchcraft. They burned down their homes. Last year in September, 2 people died. Not so long ago, even this year, it's very common. These crimes are very common here, but we were hoping that we'll also hear from the police about the prevention measures that they do have in this area, because killing of people in this area is very common.
And if you could explain this to us, the relations between the victims, whether they are from the same family, and whether multiple generations are basically being wiped out there. Can you paint that picture for us? These victims were in that household because they were there to prepare for a ceremony that was going to be performed in another village. So as per Xhosa tradition, when there is going to be ukhululo lwezila, which is the end of the mourning season, when a family was mourning a deceased person, when they conclude that season, there is a ceremony that is performed. So these victims were part of the people. They are not relatives, but they were part of the people who were there, who was going to leave in the morning, which is this morning, who were going to leave and go to another village, which is Emantlaneni, to perform the ceremony. That is how they were involved in all of this. Okay, thank you so much for your insight and for telling us what is happening there on that active crime scene where you are. That's our SABC News reporter, Nomzwanele Ngoma, joining us live this afternoon from Lusikisiki, that area in the Eastern Cape. We continue with this story now. The South African Weather Service has forecast a drop in temperatures in many parts of the country from tomorrow until Tuesday. It is also forecast a 60% chance of rain and the possibility of snow in KwaZulu-Natal. Now, last week, hundreds of road users were trapped in snow on the N3 at Van Riene's Pass between KwaZulu-Natal and the Free State. One person died of hypothermia after being trapped in the snow for 2 days. Now, meanwhile, the KwaZulu-Natal Cooperative Governance Department has given the assurance that it is ready to deal with any dangerous situation that might arise from extreme weather conditions. MK Parliamentary Leader Dr. John Hlophe has been interdicted from serving on the Judicial Service Commission for now. The Western Cape High Court has granted an urgent interdict in favour of the DA to stop the designation of Hlophe to serve on the JSC. The High Court made the ruling in a virtual sitting.
The DA launched the urgent interdict application about 3 weeks ago. The party argued that Parliament had not taken a rational decision in designating Hlophe after he was impeached from the bench on charges of gross misconduct. The DA says it welcomes the judgment as it strengthens the fight to maintain the highest standards.
It's a precedented case, the first of its nature, right? And we think it's a step in the right direction, not only for where we're heading as a political party and as a country, but also for South Africans who deserve the best representatives across all arms of state and all tables of decision-making as far as their lives are concerned.
In its ruling, the court found that the National Assembly rubber-stamped Hlophe's designation and it failed to exercise its constitutional discretion. The court also found that the National Assembly committed a material error of law and its decision was unreasonable and irrational. Parliament has consistently maintained that it will abide by the court's decision. The DA has dismissed Hlophe's legal argument that his impeachment should not have collateral damage.
We are not targeting Hlophe. What we are targeting is an upholding of the rule of law. What we're targeting is the upholding of democratic principles. And what we're targeting is cushioning South Africans.
The DA's interim interdict is subject to a review application that is yet to be heard. The review application includes applications by Corruption Watch and Freedom Under Law. MK spokesperson Nhlamulo Ndlela could not be immediately reached for comment as his phone went unanswered. Pulelani Philip, SABC News, Parliament.
Welcome back. Right, Basic Education Department Minister Siphiwe Gwarube lamented the state of the school system earlier this week, declaring it to be in disarray. According to her, the sector is facing extreme strain because of years of drastic budget cuts, economic stagnation and fiscal mismanagement. Now, the Western Cape has already cut back on teaching positions for 2025, which might result in bigger class sizes and less one-on-one contact with learners. In KwaZulu-Natal, there is a severe unemployment problem that has left at least 40,000 entry-level 1 teachers jobless. Let's have a look at what the Minister of Basic Education had to say.
It's no secret that in the recent weeks, several provincial departments of education have been vocal regarding the budget pressures that they are currently facing. And these pressures are not just a recent occurrence, but they have been years in the making due to aggressive budget cuts, economic stagnation, fiscal management across government, mismanagement across government, which is now affecting our frontline services. These budget pressures are not just numbers on spreadsheets, but they translate to fewer teachers, reduced textbooks, fewer admin support staff, which means that teachers spend more time on admin work, thereby reducing learning and teaching time. In essence, the very fabric of our children's future is now under threat if we continue in this current trajectory. In provinces like the Western Cape, we've already seen the decision to reduce the basket of teaching purse for 2025, a move that may result in fewer educators in classrooms. This may mean larger class sizes, reduced individual attention for learners, and ultimately a risk to the achievement of quality education outcomes. Unfortunately, the other provinces throughout the country are also in similar positions, with many desperately trying to find ways to avoid having to top slice their budgets for key services like textbooks provisions, like admin support or scholar transport programs. The Deputy Minister and I have been in constant engagement with the provinces to support them during this challenging time. We have committed ourselves to doing everything we can to stabilize the system and have appealed to provinces to retain the basket of posts that they currently have in order for us to not affect the frontline services or compromise the education outcomes that we desperately want to improve.
The Minister of Basic Education there now joining us live to discuss this further is Matshidiso Lenkwaso, who is a budget analyst at Section 27, as well as the chairperson of the Budget Justice Coalition, to unpack what this could potentially mean for not just teachers, but also the quality of education in the country. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about this very important aspect.
And you heard what the Minister said there right now. What does the future hold? Is it that bleak?
So So unfortunately, what the minister has painted is quite a dire situation. And without further intervention, especially from a resourcing perspective and mobilizing resources for basic education, we are concerned that this can only get worse. Since 94, South Africa has made significant gains in education attainment, especially in marginalized communities. However, with recent budget cuts, we're concerned that it might regress some of those gains that have been made, and we may continue to see overcrowded classrooms, especially in marginalized schools, as well as learners who struggle to get to school through scholar transport issues or, lack of support regarding that. So we are definitely concerned and see this as an opportunity for government to really come together to mobilize resources and to really allocate funding in a way that actually advances basic education attainment for all learners in this country.
So Minister Gwagube has projected that 7 provinces will not be able to afford their budgets. So in the 2027-28 year, then, what does this mean?
Sure. I mean, this is really concerning because what she's reflecting is that there have been budget constraints in several provinces or most provinces in the country. I mean, we concur with this because the work that we have been doing is that we've noticed the exact same thing. The departments have been crying for help for many years because of this aggressive fiscal consolidation path that our National Treasury, our government has undertaken. And so when we hear this, I mean, of course, on the surface, it is very concerning, but it is good to know that and that there's attention that's put on this issue now before we get to 2026, 2027, and we have those issues. So we see this as an opportunity to urgently reshape our budget so that we are allocating sufficient resources towards human rights allocation, particularly basic education, but also towards healthcare, towards all the other social sectors.
What could this mean for the country's education system in the long term, basically? All these staffing issues then, will it get worse?
Yeah, so if we continue on this path, it will definitely get worse because what we'll be seeing is that, I mean, we're already disinvesting in education. So our allocations, even when we do have increased allocations, they're still below inflation. And so that means it's being eroded. The value of our investments in education was eroded by inflation. But then also in the past, we had budget cuts, even just this time last year, towards key programs in basic education, including infrastructure. And so what this means is that there are promises and intentions that the minister has made towards redressing or reforming our education system. But that's unlikely to happen if there aren't the resources available to fulfill those promises. They'll just be left as promises. And this is a problem because we're seeing the effects now. But education is one of those sectors that will really truly see this when the class of grade ones next year when they go to matric, and we'll really see what the decisions that we made, especially in our resource allocation towards education, what that really meant.
Okay, so you alluded to that. What about the future of the children? South Africa is a very youthful country, and are their futures safe, basically?
That's what we are concerned about, and that's why it's just been so important to rally together, not just, for government, but also for society to come together and to start thinking about how do we fund education and how do we invest in it. Because if we go down this path, what we see is that learners will, and especially in marginalized and underserved communities, you'll find learners who will be in overcrowded classrooms, which means that they don't get the same attention. And this also advances inequality of education in the country. And this is happening even in what we consider to be wealthier provinces like the Western Cape and Gauteng, who are more resource rich and get more attention than, say, for instance, the Northwest or Limpopo or Eastern Cape, KwaZulu-Natal, who are all facing their issues. I think that it is crucial that we recognize that in this weak economic climate, when we make decisions like austere budgeting, it is the learner in South Africa who has to disproportionately face the burden of making the choice of either they're in the Western Cape, where they will be characterized by overcrowded classrooms, especially in the more impoverished communities in those areas, or they'll be maybe in Gauteng, where they're committed to maintaining their teacher posts, but then when they're alluding to budget cuts towards scholar transport or towards textbooks, and really it is the learners who are affected by this.
So the DA has called for a comprehensive spending review, which will look at all of government's spending patterns. Then what are you hoping for the outcomes there? Because the money must come from somewhere. They'll have to cut somewhere else to put it into education then.
Sure. So there are immediate interventions that can be made, and then, of course, the long term, right? So from an immediate perspective, we do agree and support the review of the spending so that it can reflect, our upcoming budget, and the budgets in future can actually reflect a society that values education. So we want to see, for the longest time, South Africa spent more on education than any other sector. We need to bring that back. We now spend more money servicing our debt, at the expense of education, at the expense of healthcare, at the expense of social protection measures. So we're hoping to see education, healthcare, social spending areas getting a large part of the budget so that we can protect the most marginalized people. And then, of course, a good question that you ask is, so where does this money come from? The Budget Justice Coalition, we are a coalition of civil society organizations, and we've noticed this trend of disinvestment, and of course government saying, well, we have no choice but to cut the budget. But actually we've proposed alternative fiscal framework and alternative ways to raise revenue. We've made examples about rethinking the pension fund of government. Like there is about 50 billion that could be invested to purchase bonds at a concession or at rates that are favorable, and that could mobilize resources. We talk about human rights impact assessments, that even if there are budget cuts that are being made, that we consider what impact this has on the most marginalized learners first. We look at, already some of our interventions have been taken up by government. So our suggestion of using the gold foreign exchange, the JFECRA, to mobilize more resources. And we're looking forward to the medium-term budget speech reflecting that those resources are going towards key areas like education, healthcare, rather than perhaps like servicing our debt.
So you basically need them to be more innovative. Are they actually listening to you then?
So this new government, maybe a new administration might be an opportunity to listen to that. So for the longest time, I think one of our criticisms is that while South Africa has great transparency in terms of our budget information, our public participation leaves more to be desired. So we would like to see a budget that's actually shaped by the people in this country. We'd like to see, we're seeing already the Department of Basic Education, Healthcare engaging with communities, but we would love to see National Treasury and Provincial Treasury departments actually shaping the budget according to their engagements with the community. So we really are calling on human rights-centered budgeting.
So let's mention, you mentioned this earlier yourself, those who will bear the brunt, the impoverished schools, the marginalized communities. What can be done immediately to bridge that gap there?
Sure. So, what we have noticed is that the departments, the national departments, but also provincial departments are meeting with Treasury to think about, the decisions that have to be made. Unfortunately, we're 1 month away from the medium-term budget speech, but we're hoping that in that short term that the various departments and the social sector departments will be better able to present a case towards an investment case towards basic education, towards healthcare. Those are immediate interventions, but of course, in the long term, we really need to rethink our fiscal framework and start moving away from austerity budgeting and more towards fiscal expansion and growing our economy. This also means that it's not just National Treasury who's leading economic policy, but there are other departments like Department of Trade and Industry. We want to industrialize so that we can generate more resources, so that we can advance the rights, resource the rights to education and healthcare. We're also looking at even our monetary policy. Really, we're asking all of government to come together and wield our economic policy to advance human rights.
So, of course, a big part of the education system in South Africa is devolved to the provinces, health and education. Does that cause discrepancies between provinces, a lot of it?
Yes, so this is some of the provinces have been complaining about that. I know provinces like the Western Cape and Gauteng will say that they have a lot of learners because there's inward migration from other provinces. And so we have made suggestions or recommendations about thinking about how we allocate resources to the provinces. We might need to, in this fiscally constrained environment, we might need to rethink our provincial equitable share formula, among others, to make sure that it actually reflects the needs of those in the provinces, and that if there are budget cuts or any decisions that are made, it's not the most marginalized and the most constrained provinces that feel that burden.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us here on this Saturday afternoon. That was Machadiso Lenkwas, who is a budget analyst at Section 27, as well as the chairperson of the Budget Justice Coalition, talking to us about the budget cuts in the Department of Education. This is Week in Review on the SABC News Channel. We will see you right after this. Welcome back. Now, the Reserve Bank has imposed a fine on Old Mutual Life Assurance Company. The central bank says this is a result of the company's non-compliance with the provisions of the Financial Intelligence Center Act following an inspection conducted in 2020. Now, the Prudential Authority, a division of the Reserve Bank mandated to supervise and enforce compliance, says the administrative sanctions imposed on Old Mutual Life Assurance Company consists of 4 cautions and a financial penalty totaling 15.9 million rand. Now, of this, 5.9 million rand is conditionally suspended for a period of 3 years from the 23rd of July. The Prudential Authority imposed a caution not to repeat the conduct which led to the non-compliance. The Reserve Bank says the company cooperated throughout the process and has undertaken the necessary remedial action to address all the identified compliance deficits. Tourism operators in the Northern Cape hope to capitalize on South Africa's astro-tourism strategy. Tourism Minister Patricia de Lille and Science, Technology and Innovation Minister Dr. Bladen Zimbande jointly launched the program at Carnarvon in the Northern Cape as part of World Tourism Day. The astro-tourism strategy aims to take advantage of towns like Carnarvon with a small population and low pollution to draw tourists.
6 astro guides have so far been trained to show tourists the night skies and narrate the stories of their forefathers' astronomy beliefs.
Astro guide is someone that takes a tourist on a night tour where we tell people indigenous stories about the stars and link them together with the stories that the Bushman people told. So we take you on a tour. We have different packages where we take people on donkey cart rides through the town, telling them about the history.
With a square kilometer array being built in the area, it's hailed as the perfect mix of science and tourism. The authorities want small towns, usually overlooked by international tourists, to benefit.
We must draw more people, more tourists that's coming to our country, to what I call these hidden gems. I mean, here you can play golf in a desert. It's not the normal golf experience. And, you know, to also get the young people to get involved. And so there's great potential for astro-tourism in this area.
The towns identified will see infrastructure development happening soon. These include roads and tourism facilities.
Others will come here. They may have some money to be able to actually invest here. So it's very important. But also, as you say, we don't want this thing to be an island in a poor community. That's the reason why we are doing a lot to actually support the local community. We've adopted a school here, we've put a laboratory in it, and other facilities. We've got scholarships, of course.